Hey, it's KJ. So excited to have you with me as we bring Jon Cryer to the KJ Today Show. Well, hello, Jon Cryer.
Hey, how are you?
I am so excited to welcome you to the KJ Today Show for the first time. I think we've talked over the years because I've been in radio forever. But this is the first time we've had you on our little positive vibe show here. So thanks for being here, Jon.
Oh, so glad to be a part of it.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people that are listening and excited and love you from Pretty in Pink and Two and a Half Men. But the conversation that we have been having today about this new podcast, it's honestly, it's been brilliant and exciting. And I don't want to say too much more. I want to hear from you, your perspective when you first started hearing the story from your friend, Suzanne, about the man who calculated death being her grandfather.
Well, yes, yes. Well, you forget that history is all around us, and it's all the people around us are a part of history. We don't always see it that way. And the crazy thing was that this whole thing came about because I was at a dinner party. And one of my wife's oldest friends, who's named Suzanne Rico, she's an anchor woman out here on KCBS. All American girl, beautiful blonde lady, and she was talking. I sort of blithely mentioned that I was a huge fan of the space race, and I loved the history of it. And she said, "Oh, my grandfather worked on the space program," and I said, "Oh, that's so cool," She said, yeah. Before that, he worked for Hitler. But anyway, and she just went on talking about that. And I was like, wait, I'm sorry, Suzanne, you're going to have to rewind and tell me about the working for Hitler part. And it turns out she had been on this kind of crazy but gut-wrenching adventure recently because her mother had passed away a few years before that. And on her deathbed, her mother admitted that she had been working on a memoir. She'd been writing a memoir, but that she wouldn't be able to finish it because she was dying. And she asked Suzanne to finish it for her. And which is just a crazy thing to ask of somebody. I mean, finishing her memoir. I mean, I don't even know where you start from that. And Suzanne certainly didn't. So she had to go through her family's history in a way that she had never really interrogated before, And so one of the first moments of the podcast is her going through her mother's things and finding a thing called the Knight's Cross, which is actually the highest medal that Hitler awarded. And she found out that her grandfather was awarded the Knight's Cross. And suddenly she realized, oh, wow, I've got to go a lot deeper into this story than I thought. And so it turns out her grandfather was a guy named Robert Lesser, who was one of Hitler's most important scientists. Hitler, had such horrifying losses in the Battle of Britain and in the Russian front that he was trying to find a whole new kind of warfare, which was robot war. And so Werner von Braun, a very famous rocket scientist, and Robert Lesser were tasked with creating new wonder weapons for Hitler, and they succeeded. They ended up succeeding too late in the war, but they were a huge part of Hitler's war effort. And so Suzanne did not realize that her father was such a big part of history, and that her mother had always been horribly traumatized by the death of her mother, Suzanne's grandmother, who died mysteriously in a bombing. And Suzanne felt like the only way to really honor her mother and finish her mother's memoir truly was to solve the mystery of who killed her grandmother and why. And to her credit, and this is an amazing thing, when we started working on the podcast, she hadn't solved the mystery, but she did it. She actually, just through shoe leather and just enormous man hours, managed to solve this 80-year-old mystery. So it was just this incredible journey for Suzanne, and we were, this is not the kind of thing I generally produce. I generally make, comedies and stuff, and this is not what I'm known for. But but seeing a friend go through this, and you're a podcast producer, this doing a narrative podcast with when she had, I mean, she traveled to Europe, she traveled, all over the United States. She was interviewing military historians and interviewing family members, interviewing concentration camp survivors. She was interviewing, just doing this incredible breadth of research. But she just the hours and hours of audio she had to go through. I mean, hundreds of hours.
Wow.
It was just this incredibly daunting, challenging thing. And she has made a really beautiful, beautiful story of a family. And this is just the first half of it, by the way. This is just how they survived World War II. There's then they were illegally smuggled to the United States to work on the space program. And so we're going to do, the second season is going to be the story of Operation Paperclip and how her family got to the United States.
This is crazy. How many times, I mean, like you said, you've worked in comedy. You've had this big, long career. How many times did you say to Suzanne or yourself, like, you can't make this stuff up?
Yes. Well, she has those moments all through the podcast, because the story takes so many crazy twists and turns. I also did a podcast called Lawyers, Guns, and Money, which is about the Iran-Contra scandal, which is also an insane story of just insane characters. It's almost a comedy, Iran-Contra, except that it had, global consequences, but that is the thing about so many of these true stories, that they are, they're stories that you wouldn't necessarily believe if they were fictional. But again, the amount of introspection that Suzanne does, and if I found out, I mean, recently I had my ancestry dug into by a TV program, and and I said, guys, let me know if there's dark parts. If there's, I'm sure, not every human in my family is going to be a saint, and I'd really love to know where everything goes wrong. And they sent me some things. I mean, there was fascinating things. Turns out I have a Mayflower ancestor who was an indentured servant, which is pretty cool. Except that he was a drunk. He was the first guy to ever get in a duel in New England. And he got in a duel, and they both lost because they shot each other, but neither of them died. But he was apparently not a great guy, and had a lot of brushes with the law. They had a lot more interesting stories as well, but that was one of the fun ones that I remember. But not nearly the history spanning consequences of Suzanne's grandfather.
Sure. The Man Who Calculated Death is the podcast. And real quick, Jon, I promised Jim, who's listening, because we just hit the end of an era with the Arrowverse and Superman and Lois finale airing, and a lot of people grieving, but also looking back and reflecting. Can you share just a quick memory from your time playing that iconic Lex Luthor?
Oh, I had a fantastic time on that, and that was the whole Arrowverse was just one for the nerds. We were I loved being a nerd. I loved reveling in it. It was that we got into the deepest, darkest recesses of DC lore was great. We just reveled in it, and it was fun because when we ended up shooting this insane crossover where we had 5 different shows cross over with each other. We had Flash and Arrow and all those, and Supergirl and Batwoman all cross over, and Legends of Tomorrow, as a matter of fact. It was just this huge, ridiculous undertaking, and we all, I don't know, there was. We every now and then there was these days when we'd look around and all of us in these ridiculous costumes saying these ridiculous things, and but we were all having a ball, and I am sorry to see Superman and Lois go as well, because I think that was just a fantastic new look at those characters. I think they managed to really crack it by being faithful to who Superman is, but also finding a new way to show it. And that show is really, really so well done. And my biggest regret is that I never was on it. I would have loved to
yes.
won by that one.
Well, thank you, Jon. I know you got a lot more interviews today. The Man Who Calculated Death podcast is out. And when season 2 comes out, get back on the KJ Today show, please.
Happy to. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me for another celebrity interview. KJ Today, where you'll find the positive vibes of pop culture, people to know, and pets. If you like this interview, please make sure you give it a like, rate, review, and subscribe. And join us on YouTube the first Wednesday of every month for the full KJ Today show, where we play trivia, bring you more celebrity guests, and even a pet of the week to keep you feeling the positive vibes.